and welcome to Canguro English. I'm Christian, and today we are going to be asking the question, is the English language sexist? The Oxford English Dictionary defines sexism as prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination, typically against women, on the basis of sex. Now, I don't think anybody has ever accused the English language of being sexist towards men, so today we're going to focus more specifically on the charge that English is sexist against women. So I would like to start this class today with a riddle. A father and his son are driving along and they have a terrible accident and the father is killed. The son is taken to the hospital and when he arrives in the operating room, the surgeon looks down and says, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." How can this be? Now, maybe if you said that the surgeon was the boy's stepfather, or maybe that the parents of the boy were gay, well, that's very imaginative, but maybe you overlooked, of course, the most simple of answers, which is that the surgeon is the boy's mother. So now maybe you're feeling terribly ashamed of yourself and asking yourself, oh, how could I be so prejudiced against women, and how could I be so sexist? I didn't realize this monster inside me. But don't worry, you're not alone. In research conducted by Michaela Wapman and Deborah Bell, when they asked groups of people exactly the same riddle, only 15% of children and 14% of students gave the answer that the surgeon was the mum. In fact, 78% of people who described themselves as feminists got the answer wrong. So, what could be some of the reasons why this is? Well, the first reason, of course, is that it is a riddle, and riddles, by their very nature, are designed to trick and confuse you. So, it's very difficult to guess the correct answer. If it was easy, it wouldn't be a riddle. The second reason is that historically, certain professions have a gender bias towards one sex, and other professions have a gender bias towards another. So, for example, when we think about a surgeon, a majority of people think about a man. When we think about a welder, most people think about men. And when we think about other jobs, like, for example, cleaning, then we think about a woman. And this is part of the findings of the same research that nobody talks about much, which is that when they changed the question so that it was the mother and the daughter driving the car, and the mother was killed, and it was a nurse at the hospital who said, "This is my daughter," the results were exactly the same. So this gender bias towards men and towards women isn't something that exists in the English language. It's something that simply exists in the society in which we live, and based on historical, professional gender bias. A lot of the accusations of sexism in English arise from the misunderstanding between grammatical gender and biological gender. Biological gender describes the sex of a living thing, a dog, a cat, a cow, whether it has male or female anatomy. But grammatical gender has nothing to do with masculine or feminine aspects. Grammatical gender simply assigns nouns a gender so that they can modify other words around them. So, for example, in Spanish, the word is puerta, which is feminine. So, therefore, we have to modify the definite article, la, and also the adjective, buena, to match the feminine noun. A masculine noun, we have to modify, again, the article and the adjective which goes with it. But this is not the same as thinking about someone's biological sex. Spanish people don't think about tables as females, as women, having breasts. There aren't just masculine and feminine genders in a language. You can have all different types of genders. Some languages have genders for things that are alive and things that are dead, male, female, things that are neutered. It's very complicated. So we need to separate the idea of masculine and feminine. Now, interestingly, Old English did have grammatical gender, which means that we had masculine and feminine nouns. But modern English today, we don't have any type of grammatical gender. All we have are the remnants of Old English gender. We have the difference between he and she and his and hers. But we don't have nouns that are masculine and feminine. We don't have adjectives that are masculine and feminine, or even articles that are masculine and feminine. So it's interesting that a language like English, which doesn't actually have grammatical genders, should be accused so much of being sexist. But unfortunately, it is still possible to offend people by using certain words in English. So how can we avoid being sexist in English? Well, one way is that we can use the singular they or the singular their. Um, in the past, some people would use the masculine, he or his, to refer to a group of mixed genders. Okay, but now that's seen as a bit old-fashioned. Now, there's two options available. You could use he and she together and his and hers together, but it sounds very awkward. For example, someone called, but he or she didn't leave his or her number. Now, that really is just awkward. So what we can use is the singular they or their instead of he and she and his and her. You could say, someone called, but they didn't leave their number. Now, some of the grammar police will try to tell you that the singular they and their is grammatically incorrect, but unfortunately, that is a pseudo rule that was invented by grammarians for no particular reason, and singular they and their has been used in English for hundreds of years. So just ignore them and use it as you like. But we also have some vocabulary in English which people find offensive. So for example, manpower, man-made, fireman, policeman, guys. We even have a verb in English, man. So instead of using these terms, you can use the gender-neutral terms in order to minimize offending people. So man-made, instead of man-made, you can use artificial. Instead of fireman, you can use firefighter. Instead of policeman, police officer. And instead of using the verb man, find a different verb which means something similar. But sometimes it is really difficult to avoid using terms that some people find offensive. When Neil Armstrong took his first steps on the moon, he said, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Now, probably some people would say he should have said, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for humankind." But unfortunately, the word human comes from the Latin homo, which again is a masculine word. In order to believe that the English language is sexist, you have to believe in the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, also known as linguistic relativity, which says that the language that we speak and the words that we use affect the way that we think and the way that we see the world. But despite decades of empirical research, none of the predictions of this theory have ever proven to be true. So it seems that the language that we speak and the words we use don't affect the way that we think. Words like manpower and mankind are simply that, just words. Words only mean what people use them to mean. As Dr. Kelly L. Ross says, "It is an evil principle to think that we can tell other people what they mean by what they say, because of some theory we have that makes it mean something in particular to us, even when they obviously mean something else." You might have been tricked into believing that changing the language is going to eliminate sexism in society. But people are sexist, not language. If you don't believe me, let's look at Iran. Modern Persian, which is spoken in Iran, is a language completely without gender. They don't have separate words for he and she. They don't have separate words for married and unmarried women. It's one of the few languages in the world that's completely without gender. So is Iran a feminist utopia where men and women are treated equally? Well, no. In reality, every aspect of a woman's life, from where she can work, what she can study at university, where she can travel, are all tightly regulated by men and the government. Well, hopefully that has helped to answer the question about whether English is a sexist language. If you want to see any more videos about English, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, don't forget to subscribe to Canguro English. Thank you very much. I'll see you in class.